Hi, welcome to Blue Bee Counseling's second class on parenting, which is exciting. We love our class on parenting. We're glad that you're all here with us. And you're here with us because there's probably some issues happening at home, whether you're wondering or recognizing that there's some complications that might be arising with some of your children. And so therefore, we have some tips and tricks that are going to help you out with possibly parenting. And so stay tuned. It's going to be a very fun ride today. We're going to be talking about a bunch of things. Now, my name is Brandy Petarakis. I'm the owner of Blue Bee Counseling Services. I'm also an LCSW. And I have here with me Sydney Fisher, who's an intern, and put together all this wonderful presentation for us, which we're super excited to have you here today with us. Thank you for doing this. Now, let's dive in. We are going to talk about relationship building and emotional connections, week 2. Yay!
Woo-hoo!
And the R is part of the
5 R's of parenting. So last week we talked about briefly a bit of the 5 different R's and that they all go under the umbrella of resilience, which was our main point of last week's class. And today we're going to break down R number 1, which is relationship building and emotional connectedness. So we're just going to dive right in and talk about sensitive caregiving.
And the purpose to all of these R's that we're doing is that these are supposed to be building fundamentals.
Building blocks.
Yeah, building blocks, the fundamentals of you connecting with your child, helping them, your relationship with them, helping them figure out things for themselves, understanding different components that's going to be able to secure a really great relationship with them. And so that's the purpose of today, is to help you formulate these. Be curious, come in with a question, be curious about them, lean into some of these things that we're diving into of how they're going to be helpful for you and your child at home, as well as for you. Like sometimes if we repair ourselves, then it will teach our children how to repair themselves, or how to formulate different kind of conversations and improve their sense of well-being in their own home and lifestyle. So, all right, so let's do it.
Okay, so
sensitive caregiving.
Sensitive caregiving.
Okay.
The background of kind of what this is it's like an essential aspect of positive parenting, and it influences executive functioning and the development of a secure attachment. Later on today, we're going to talk about the different attachments, and secure is what we want with our children. It's knowing when and how to respond appropriately given your child and their certain circumstances that they're going through. And I'm sure parents with multiple children understand that, like, you're a different parent to each child, and each child is unique. So understanding that every child does have their different needs and signals to best help them. And that's kind of what sensitive caregiving is. It's like figuring out how to be sensitive to what they need as an individual. And so it's kind of like, let's get to know our child. And off to the side, we have questions asked to know your child of, like, what delights them, what makes them stressed, do they like lots of activity, do they feel safer when they're in a quiet space, and just kind of being able to cater your type of parenting directly to what they need.
I'm going to ask a couple of different ones, or put in a couple of different responses here too. I get in my office a lot of times parents who are like, they just cry, and then they get upset, and then I get upset, and they get more upset. And so I think some part of the sensitive caregiving is also recognizing, like, when my child cries, what does that mean? And I think we're really empathetic to newborn babies, right? Because it goes back to a couple of the 3 fundamentals. Are they hungry? Do they need a diaper change? Or are they not feeling well, right? And so with that, or uncomfortable in some way. And so what we can do is, like, sometimes we forget to do that with our little toddlers, or even some of our teenagers, right? Where we're like, or can we say spouses too, maybe? Where it's like, there are some sensitive caregiving that we can also give to them of, like, why are they behaving the way that they're behaving? Like, knowing them the way that I know them, why would they react this way? What is going on with them? And if I can put a correlation between a couple of components, like when my child goes to the grocery store and they fall down on the floor and they're freaking out and they're screaming and yelling because they want that toy, and I say no, then, I understand that there's a form of, like, rejection that kind of happens here, or sensitivity to, not feeling like they want this toy, but that they're not being able to get this toy, and they don't understand why. And so sometimes kneeling on the ground with them and being like, what's going on? Why are you feeling this way? Or, you know what, let's talk about this a little bit more. It seems like you're really upset about, you know, not being able to have this toy. And so these are some of the questions to know about your child. If you can know some of these deep questions and understand them at a little bit deeper level, like Sydney's talking about, then we can move through to how to work through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And it's just like important to fully understand your child and exactly what they're going through. And when you get down on their level, it helps them feel connected to you. And that's where building a relationship comes in. We want to talk a little bit about attachments. So there are 4 different attachments, and we'll break down each one more
And
in
if you
depth.
look online, there's actually more than 4, but these are just the core 4. Sometimes they're like disorganized avoidant or avoidant anxious. Like you'll see a bunch of these online. So if you're really interested about these, you can go online.
Yeah.
We are not pros on attachment, right? But we definitely want to add these in here as a curiosity and a level of like education to recognize and understand just a little bit more about your child.
Yeah. So, first, being secure. A child is secure when they show some distress about when they are separated from their caregiver, but then are welcome their caregiver warmly when they come back into contact. An anxious resistant is a child who is frightened by separation and continues to display anxious behavior once the caregiver has returned to them. Avoidant is a child who reacts fairly calm to a parent leaving and doesn't really embrace their return. And then disorganized is odd or ambivalent behavior toward a caregiver upon return, or even like turning away, hitting the caregiver. Um, and then we have a little bit of an analogy of how you can recognize this about your child on a playground. Would you like to explain that?
Yeah. So how I've been, and I might fudge this up just a little bit, but go with me on it. But I like to see it as kind of like on a playground. So you have maybe an avoidant um, child when you go to a playground and they are down kind of playing with themselves. They see the others kind of playing and they want to go and play, but they are waiting back and seeing if they get an invitation before just announcing that they want to play with them. Instead of just going and playing, they kind of like are spying, or they're kind of watching with like longing eyes to wanting to be with them. So they're the kind of child that's going to go like hide underneath the play set, kind of, they might go hurry and run up on the slide, and they'll look around, and then they hurry and slide down the slide, and then they go back underneath the play set. And so they're just more avoidant of making attachments or seeing other people or embracing others on the playground. Anxious resistant. This one is really interesting because this is the child that's just going to sit by you and not want to go and play on the playground. They're going to feel really anxious. They're going to push back against going on the playground. And you're like, no, go play with other kids. Look at, they're having such a good time. And you can see the longing in their eyes and that they really want to do it. But there's this pushback that's kind of happening, and they're just sitting and frightened. Sometimes they'll even hold on to. I see these kind of kids that like kind of come into my office, and they're like pulling their head into their parent. They're really like not willing to like talk as openly, and it's a little bit harder to get things out of them. I find parents speak for these kids quite a bit, like, oh, like Tommy's feeling this, and they're like, oh, but really, like, can Tommy tell me how Tommy's feeling? No, Tommy can't tell you how he's feeling. Tommy's anxious. Like, he's really pushing back. This isn't necessarily based on like what kind of parent you are. It could be biological. It could be how they grew up. It could be circumstances of their environment around them. There's a lot of factors that play into this, but it also could be definitely, trauma that's been happened, or other components that can cause a little bit of this stable home life or feelings of fear that kind of engage them. And so disorganized is the fun one. You tell your kid to go play, and they go off and play. They're making friends with everyone. In fact, you look up and you can't even find your kid on the playground. They are gone. Like, they are in 2 playgrounds over to the left somewhere, and they have made all the friends, and they've rallied everyone around them, and they have made very direct and decisive playing ways that they are going to play at the playground, and everyone else needs to follow that way too. And so this is kind of a disorganized, like, they don't really have that attachment. They're not really worried about where mom's at or worried about like getting lost, they can kind of tend to be a little bit more angry towards parents when they leave and don't come back. And so it's like more disorganized, meaning that they're just not as secure. And then that goes into a secure attachment. So a secure attachment with a child would be like when they run out into the playground, they're like, "Hi, mom. Hey, mom, look at me." And they're like waving to mom, and then they're like, "Okay, I'm gonna go play on the slide right over here." And the mom's like, "Okay, go play on the slide." And they're like, "Okay, I'm right here. Hi, mom. Look at me go down the slide." And mom's like, "Hi, go down the slide." And so then the kid goes down the slide, and then they get off the slide and they're like, "I did it." And the mom's like, "Yay, you did it." And they're like, "Okay, I'm just gonna be right up there." Okay, mom. And they're like, "Okay, go and play up there." And then they get up there and they're like, "Hi, mom." So that is more secure attachment. And so it's like there's more of a welcome kind of connection that kind of happens. They're not really worried about mom leaving, so they don't have to like worry about staying and sticking with mom, but they're also not like wandering away from the playground. They're also feeling confident about themselves not to hide or feel that avoidant type of necessarily behaviors about the kids around them. They just recognize their worth and their value, and they'll start playing with kids. And they'll be like, "Hey, mom, look at my friend. My friend's name's Sally." And you're like, "Hi, Sally." And then they're like, "Okay, can Sally come over and play later?" And you're like, "Oh, like we're still getting to know Sally." So like some things like that where there's more of the secure attachment. They're not really open to all of the problems that infringe the world around them, but they are open to understanding that there are cautionary pieces that could be contributing to possible issues that could lay out in front of them. So then they kind of like hold back just a little bit, but they are not scared to move forward.
I love that analogy because it like puts it in like real life experiences, and that's why it makes it easier for you to be able to like recognize the different attachments in your child.
And how to move on to teenagers too.
Oh yeah.
Like how to see that in teenagers as well. Like teenagers are a little bit harder because of more of them, even though they might have been secure when they were a child, they're all gonna feel
They're
little
gonna
bit more
a little pushback.
pushback for sure. So it's gonna be a little bit different, but you'll see some of those as well in your teens.
So we're just gonna break down each one and give a little bit more context and like how to maybe improve an attachment or develop more of a secure attachment. Just like ask yourself, does your child greet you with warmth when you enter a room? And if so, then your child does in fact have a secure attachment. And this means that later in life, they'll be comfortable with intimacy, have good coping and problem solving skills, communicate effectively, be comfortable being close with other people, but also being alone. And they'll be more trusting, empathetic, compassionate, and then they'll be able to regulate their emotions and their feelings. And if you're wondering, how do I develop a secure attachment, even if in yourself you realize like, oh, maybe I don't have a secure attachment, I think it's also important to, when we're going through this, turn it in towards yourself and think about, okay, how does this affect me? What could I improve with myself so that you can better build a relationship with your child. So developing a secure attachment is starting to pay attention to how you feel in relationships, combat cognitive distortions, dig into your past, think about like what certain things could have affected you to feel the certain way that you feel, realize that you are good, you are worthy, and you are strong. Get out of your comfort zone, do things that make you a little uncomfortable, and then even reaching out to a therapist and working with them.
One of the things I'd like to just go off of is like combating cognitive distortions is like I just want to kind of throw a couple of them out there. If you go onto Google Images, they have papers and papers and papers of these. And so you can go on and some of them are like, understand the 12 cognitive distortions. And then some of them are like, understand the 54 cognitive distortions. So it's like, there's an unlimited amount of these, but basically cognitive distortions is about those distortive mindsets or thoughts that we have that lead us into unhealthy behaviors. So, such as like black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking, definitely like scapegoat type of thinking. And of course, my mind kind of goes blank as I'm thinking of all these. There's 54 of them or 500 million of them, and I can't think of any of them. But definitely look up those and see kind of like put some check marks by them of what kind of ones that you have. And that will be super helpful in you being like, okay, now I can call those out and label them when I'm using them so I can start working on eliminating them.
Bring on a bit of self-awareness.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so does your child avoid physical closeness with you and others? If so, then maybe your child has a little bit of an avoidant attachment. This isn't saying like one is better than the other or that it's like their problem to deal with forever. Like there are always ways to be benefiting and changing.
Basically, you're not a bad parent.
Yeah, you didn't
especially
fail.
if you have teenagers that are not doing these. If you have children are more willing to give you like love and affection. They want to give you love and affection, and they desire it and need it from you.
And teenagers may want it, but they're not willing to give it.
Yeah, that's probably more true. And so with that, in this case, if you're feeling some signs of this avoidant attachment, then this is some things to just kind of reflect about and be like, oh, this isn't necessarily because I'm a bad parent, but there could be outside situations that are happening that are causing the child to feel a certain way, and they might not feel safe talking to you about these things. And so this is really important to kind of watch for these signs of attachment so you can be like, whoa, because my child's not exhibiting these things or showing or showcasing these things, then therefore I need to do something a little bit differently. If they're not willing to talk to me, this might be a really great time to get them to a therapist or encourage them to talk to somebody that's safe and secure. More likely as an adult. I like the adult talking a little bit better, that could be helpful for them and lead them in a correct way.
Right. And just also like giving them an outside source that is safe for them while you can then take the time to build a safe connection with them where they can eventually be able to speak to you and have a trusted sense of connection with you to be open about things.
Sometimes I feel like just the openness of like, hey, I'm recognizing that like there might be a part that I play in this, and not necessarily that it was anything wrong that you did as a parent, but it might have been something that they felt like there was something that they saw in that you weren't meaning to exhibit or to show them or to make them feel, that led them to pull away from you. And so this is like just some good things of like recognizing that part of it and taking accountability for that part. I'm sorry that you saw that way. It wasn't meant to be seen that way.
I think there are a lot of misconceptions between parent and child relationships. Sometimes parents do something and they don't fully explain why they're doing what they're doing, and the child doesn't fully understand. And so even taking a minute to be like, oh, I am not letting you go to this friend's house because A, B, C, and D, so that the child understands, instead of being like, oh, just because I said so. They don't have the ability yet to fully understand. They haven't had the life experience to fully understand why you parent them in certain ways.
And I think sometimes gaining that trust for them too, of like, I there's a reason why I'm saying this, and this is what my reasoning is. And it's understandable that you might not understand that yet. I didn't understand that back when my parent told me that too. And like, this is that part of like trust as a parent, but can we be creative about another scenario, or what do you feel like you're losing out on the most? And can we replicate that in some way at a different time, doing something different that is safe and can build that relationship or do that thing that you really want to do. So, and kids and teens are more apt to like listening if you have possible solutions or you want to work out a solution with them.
For sure.
So signs of avoidant attachment.
So they like to be alone, kind of do their own routine. They have a hard time talking about or expressing their emotions. They'll probably withdraw a lot from being able to connect with you. If you try to like open up connection, they try to avoid it. And then they kind of have a negative viewpoint of others.
Which is hard because I look at that and I'm like, that's every teenager.
It is hard to point out, for sure. Teenagers, they avoid their parents.
So I think with this is there is a sense of normalcy that comes with teenagers in this, right? But we're not talking about what every teenager kind of does. They're going to feel a little bit more safer isolating in a way in their rooms. And so we don't want to be like, you need to be out with the family 24 hours a day. We definitely need to give them that. But we also need to encourage them to kind of pull away from some of those behaviors as well, because it can build unhealthy attachments or complications, especially if they're being a little bit more avoidant and doing some of these behaviors. So can we set some boundaries on it?
Yeah.
Like, hey, how about you have like a good 2 hours in your room a day or an hour and a half or whatever it is
Mm-hmm.
that you feel like is appropriate for them. And then, could we also make sure that you come up into the family and spend some time with us and do some things?
Yeah.
And then when they're up there, what are you doing? Are you on your phone? Are you busy? Because if they're feeling like, well, why am I even up here? I'm forced to be up here, but it's not
We're
really
not doing
family time. We're
anything.
not doing anything. And all she wants me to do is jobs every day. Yes, hi kids, you're listening to this. Like my kids are like, whoa, mom, that's you. But like really, like if every time we see them it's about what they didn't do or there's shame put on them for the things that they need to be better at or what's your
Mhm.
grades like or if we're hounding them for things, then of course they're going to want to go stay in their room. So when they come out of their rooms there needs to be some sort of a direction and some sort of a like some sort of a line that's given of
Mhm.
like, well, we're expecting you to be up here because we're doing this as a family
Yeah.
instead of just I just want you up here.
Mhm. For sure. And then these are just some tips of how to maybe like help your child get out of maybe an avoidant attachment is helping them practice expressing their feelings, maybe naming their feelings with them, taking a journey back in time. I feel like this would be more so for teenagers and thinking back to like maybe things that happened when they were young, like
Remember that funny thing that you did when you were funny? That was funny. Remember when you like you broke that glass of mine on the ground and you like hid all the components under the table? That's
Mhm.
funny.
That
Like
was
that was
so funny
funny.
of you.
Like let's or even like some components of remember when you did that really good thing? Like
Mhm.
that was really cool that you did that. That
For
can build
sure.
more self-confidence and make them feel good when they're around you.
Hmm. And I also think for kids, it's hard to like take the action to put themselves out of their comfort zone. So sometimes you creating the experiences to help them get out of their comfort zone will teach them to be experience the uncomfortable and get past that
Mhm.
and be able to develop more of a secure attachment and then learning more about other people, seeing their point of view, and then also getting support from a therapist if you may feel it's more of an extreme and you need more help.
Yes, and we
Mhm.
definitely have play therapy that
Mhm.
really helps. Like I think getting down on the ground with your kids
Mhm.
and just playing with them for 5 minutes a day can be fundamental in the
Mhm.
amount of trust that can be built between parents
Oh
and
yeah.
the connection that can be built. It's just 5 minutes of time.
Mhm.
I know that feels like sometimes really a lot,
Mhm.
but it can do wonders to your relationship in building things that are more secure and helping them get out of these avoidant, disorganized or what's the other one?
Anxious.
Anxious.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So does your child cry? Oh, this leads us into anxious.
I love
Does your
that.
child cry whenever they need to like separate from you or beg you not to go? Think about kindergarten drop off the first time. Is your kid like clawing onto you, screaming, "Don't leave me here"?
Mhm.
Um, these are some signs of maybe your child is anxiously attached, afraid of being abandoned, self-critical, and constantly looking for approval, always the pursuer, trying to repeatedly reach out to you, try and get you to like pay attention to them. These are all things.
I think on a teenage level too,
Mhm.
reminding yourself that this can happen with teenagers too. Like
Mhm.
their friends invite them to go out and they're like, no, I'm going to stay at home.
Mhm.
Or hey, let's go out to dinner as a family. No, can't we just
Mhm.
eat at home? Why are we not eating at home? Or let's go
Yeah.
to a movie. Do we have to go to a movie? Can we just stay and play games at home?
Mhm.
Like finding that anxiously attached is like there's struggle there too with them getting outside into the world around them or
Mhm.
into integrating with friendships. And so being curious about that,
Yeah.
what makes you feel anxious? If you're working with teenagers, like what does make you feel anxious when you think about having to like leave the home and go and hang out with your friends? Like
Mhm.
what are your worries and fears there? See if they'll open up to you about those things,
Yeah.
because you might find some really great gold mine stuff in that.
Mhm.
And then validate them in it. It's totally understandable that you feel that way, that you feel like your friends might like not talk to you and that you might feel like you're left out of things, or you might be a little bit apprehensive because Sally wasn't very nice to you the last time that you hung out with her. And so I think validation is huge in that,
Mhm.
because then that pulls down their walls to let them want to talk to you more, because if you don't do that, then
They'll
they're not
keep it
gonna.
all. They'll keep it all inside.
They'll keep it all inside, and you're not a
Mhm.
safe person to share those things with, because you make them feel like their feelings are inadequate or unjust or not good enough.
And I think it's also safe to say that almost every single teenager will experience this at one point throughout their teen
Mhm.
years of being anxious of like social anxiety and going out and making friends, and there's constant like critiquing of themselves of thinking, oh, am I going to be cool enough, am I going to get to hang out with these kids, or are they not going to like me? I think every teenager has those thoughts, and just like recognizing that
Mhm.
your child is most likely having those thoughts about themselves.
Yes, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it's good for us to recognize, like,
Mm-hmm.
it just because we're having those thoughts doesn't mean that they're anxiously attached
Mm-hmm.
either.
Yeah,
Like
there is
it.
a normal
Mhm,
amount.
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but when it becomes repeated and
Mm-hmm.
there's more complications with issues of functioning in daily life around these components, then we can look more into deeply. Is there an anxiously attached issue here?
Mm-hmm. For sure. These are just some things that we could do to maybe help resolve an anxious attachment, reflecting on their past, maybe some things that help them be or made them feel anxious or like you were going to leave them or something. Develop coping skills, and then when they're ready, practice being alone. I think that is a big concept of like learning to feel that feeling of being alone and just sitting in it. And it's going to be difficult for them, but learning how to um, just accept that, and then reminding themselves that they're strong, and then also again maybe collaborating with a therapist for
Mm.
extremes.
Sometimes I like to go into like, what's the worst scenario?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Worst case scenario.
what's the worst thing that can happen here, or what are you worried about? Like diving into some of those deep feelings about, are you fearful that that could happen? And I think reflect on your past is a really good one on that number one right there, because it tells you, like, have I never came back to you when you went to school in the
Mm-hmm.
past? Like, have I forgotten you? And if so, and there has been a situation where you left a kid at a store and they're feeling
Mm-hmm.
more anxiously attached, well, then repairing that and saying, yeah, that was a circumstance and a situation that did happen. And, but I did come back for you and I did
Mm-hmm.
find you and I did, it wasn't, create that safety in there and repair that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that can be super helpful. Okay. And what are your breathing skills when you're feeling anxious about going to school or you're feeling anxious about hanging out with your friends?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about some of your breathing techniques. Like take some big deep breaths, work on some of those cognitive distortions that are coming in of like the nevers and the always. That's not true necessarily. And so, working through some of those thoughts that can kind of help lead you into a different way. Sometimes I like to have 3 questions. I'll tell my clients, like, come up with an A, B, and C. And that can be really helpful of like, okay, ask that questions. If you answer yes to that question, okay, then there's an issue here.
Mm-hmm.
If we can answer no, that's not necessarily true, then okay, let's call out some of those lies and let's move on with some deeper level of thinking that can be more helpful in allowing us to do something that's hard and uncomfortable, and it's
Mm-hmm.
being vulnerable. It really is.
Yeah. Okay. On to our last one. Does your child ever become hostile or aggressive towards you? Um, just some reasons or things to look for if your child has a disorganized attachment is maybe they have some unresolved trauma
Mhm.
that maybe we didn't fix. They're unable to self-regulate their emotions. Lots of maybe with like younger kids tantrums, explosions of anger. They find intimacy and trust difficult. They tend to dissociate, have mental health issues, lack of empathy, negative self talk and self image, and they want to be close maybe to you or others, but they're fearful of it. And then they have a tendency to recreate dysfunctional relationships.
Yes, and this kind of goes into a little bit, like I like to add in teens here.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you watch for these signs in your teens as well as promiscuous behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Their grades start slipping. Sometimes that can kind of help you recognize some of this disorganized attachment. That can also happen with anxious attachment or avoidant attachment as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, be aware of like where they start self-inflicting pain upon themselves.
Mm-hmm.
This is where there's more depressive symptoms or a lot more bigger fear things that kind of happening. They stop doing things that they once used to be involved in, and they start pulling away from others. some big things here is there's this lack of like they tend to get really hard and down on themselves really
Mhm.
quickly and easily. The little tiny things that would be a little problem are like a big problem. So you're seeing like a normal behavior would be like in this realm where they're blowing it into like this realm over here or this realm over here. And so they're either under making it's not that big of a deal and it's not we're going to brush that under the rug. We're going to let that go. We're not going to talk about that. Or they're like, what? This is so happening. And everything's blowing up and things are flying off dressers and tables. And their reactions are a lot bigger and unhealthy. And so that's some ways to watch kind of with some disorganized attachment issues.
For sure. And the good thing about this is that there's always ways to fix this. There's always
Mm-hmm.
ways to repair it. Be compassionate with yourself. As you own maybe your childhood narrative, maybe you need to look in. Maybe you have a disorganized attachment and it's led onto them. Start to become aware of the parts of the self you had to protect and hide. Maybe they have something that they're protecting and we just don't realize it.
Might be a safety issue. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Acknowledge any unresolved anger. Say, I understand you're feeling angry about this. Label their feelings. Help them feel seen and heard. If they become violent, seek help. Avoid help. What's the word I'm looking for? Avoid partners who are frightening and inconsistent. Um, kind of don't let them find relationships or friendships that may seem toxic if you recognize that. Seek out people with secure attachments and then work with a counselor to help them develop a secure attachment. And then also working towards resolving any past trauma that we may not have resolved yet.
Mm-hmm. This is like big time self esteem and
Mm-hmm.
wound work. Like if you start working with a therapist, I start going in and working on wounds that have been open and are not healed yet. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is like some big time trauma work that I work through, and I find it super rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually heals quite quickly,
Mm-hmm.
the trauma work, when we start diving into it.
Okay, so those are about a little bit of the 4 attachment styles that we wanted to talk about. And we're going to talk a little bit about delight time, which was a little bit mentioned earlier, of spending just 5 minutes with your child. The fastest strategy to connect and build a relationship with them is to have a moment of joy with them. These are things that they're going to remember when they're going through something hard or maybe feel like you're not listening. They're going to remember moments of shared joy with you and that you do spend time with them. Just taking even 5 minutes out of your day and let them lead in whatever activity that they want to choose. Let them be in charge. Don't ask questions. Don't tell them what to do. Like, they are in charge. And then following this acronym of PRIDE, which we'll break down. This is also can be more used with little like your younger kids, but I think you could reframe it for your teenagers as
Mm-hmm.
well. Praise, be specific. I love the way you piece those Legos together. Maybe with a teen you could say, I love the way you handled that situation with maybe an argument with their friend. Reflection, if they say I'm reading now, reflect back and say you're reading now. Imitation, if they're stacking blocks, you stack blocks. Description, narrate your child's play like you're a sportscaster or maybe like a news anchor. Enthusiasm, reinforce appropriate and positive behavior and express your enthusiasm. Help them see that like you're happy to be with them, enjoying your time with them, so that they feel like, oh, my mom or my dad enjoys me and my company, and that builds a better relationship.
I think that it's also good for them to see because they can tell. I love it. It's called the gleam in a parent's eye,
Mm-hmm.
and they can tell whether or not you approve of them by the way that you look at them and see them and hear them and validate them
Mm-hmm.
and seek to understand them. And so I think that like this is a really important concept that we don't dive into a lot, but it can happen really easily in child play. And so, like playing with a child and having that 5 minutes of time with a child, I think it's also important with a teenager,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like finding that 5 minutes to be like, hey, how'd your day go? What's up? Like, what are things going on? What are your,
Mm-hmm.
even that past reflection. Let's talk about the past. Let's see, do you remember that one time when we did that one thing? Or, hey, what are your goals for your future? Those things that you're really looking forward to. And then making sure, like, oh, well, I don't know if I'd necessarily do that. That's not going to bring any income in, and that's not really
Mhm.
supportive for your life. But like, really support their hopes and dreams and be like, okay, how do we make that happen for you?
Mhm.
Like, how can I support you in that? And like, you're in charge of making your own dreams come true, but I can support you. Oh, you need me to give you $500 to buy that PC or console. Oh, that's, while that is something that could be very helpful for your dreams to come true, let's find a way to like help you earn some money so that you can
Mhm.
buy that thing. So not giving it, but supplying a way to for them to accomplish it. So I love these things. This is play therapy type of ideas: the praise, the reflection, the invitation, the description, and the enthusiasm. Like, those are all things and components that we use in our own play therapy room here at Blue Bee Counseling. And so
Mhm.
this is a great component to dive into with your own kids when you take that 5 minutes of time to play with them on the floor.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Okay, moving on. I think it's important to talk about understanding a child's anxiety.
mhm.
A lot of children have anxiety, whether it's normal or a healthy amount versus an unhealthy amount, I think can sometimes be misunderstood. So we're just going to break down the difference between maybe fear and actual anxiety that may need to be like looked at and help them to maybe resolve some of that anxiety. Some ways of looking at fear, of recognizing that that is just fear, is what if statements and concerns that are reasonable and expected for maybe new situations that they're going into. Your child is responsive to suggestions and change. They ask questions, and the answers that you give them are accepted. Your child absorbs information and benefits from reassurance, and their symptoms diminish over time. And then they also facilitate positive change. Whereas a child who is suffering with anxiety is, I'm not going to go because, and they give a reason, or they demonstrate excessive distress out of proportion to the situation. They're easily distressed, agitated, or angry when in a stressful situation. They have headaches or stomach aches that regularly too sick to go to school, which I think sometimes we often see with our littles in elementary school. Anticipatory anxiety, worrying hours, days, weeks ahead before a situation is going to happen, and they demonstrate excessive avoidance, and it gets to the point where it disrupts the well-being of your child functioning and your family unit functioning. So let's just break down a few ways to maybe help your child cope with anxiety. Don't let them avoid the avoidances. And then be positive and teach self-talk. Calm yourself down before approaching them. Sometimes having a child kind of being anxious and you don't really fully understand why they're being anxious, we can easily maybe snap or be like, no, like, you'll be fine, and kind of shut down the way that they're feeling. But taking a moment and calm yourself down before approaching them and having a discussion with them about why they are anxious about a certain
We do a really
situation.
good job of mimicking
Mm-hmm.
others' emotions. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you come in hot, then they're going to also come in hot, and they're going to
It's just
want to
gonna keep
raise you one,
building.
right? And so we need to make sure that we come in cool as a cat and not fall for the trap of that.
Mm-hmm. And then don't just wait for the problem to go away. Think like, oh, like, this is normal behavior. They're just a kid. They'll grow out of it. Like, let's try and resolve that now, because it's also not fun for them. They don't like feeling anxious. You don't like seeing them anxious. So let's not just wish the problem away. And then exercise, eat healthy, get sleep, make sure that they're going to bed at a reasonable hour and that they're getting their 3 meals. And then also just like focusing on fun experiences, doing something with them and being like, hey, like, isn't this fun? Are you enjoying yourself? Helping them recognize the good moments versus the more anxious moments.
I think these are awesome.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about building that connection and also communicating with your child. um, Connect with your child before you choose to like correct them. Connection is the antidote to shame. I think sometimes um, parents will try to correct how a child behaved to like teach them lessons, but it does a little bit of damage because it makes them feel shameful for maybe their behavior, and maybe their behavior was wrong and it wasn't appropriate, but let's connect with them first before we correct them. It's about the relationship underneath specific behaviors, and it does not mean that they are you have to approve of every decision that they make, but allowing them to make those decisions for themselves, and also allow for movement and flexibility in life, and show acceptance even in the midst of hard times, because there's going to be moments where maybe you don't agree with the choice that your child has made, but that doesn't mean you need to make them feel shame for it. Just accept them for who they are and the decisions that they make, and help them maybe repair it if they need help. And then I just love this little quote off to the side that says, "Our goal with kids is to maintain a connection with their hearts while teaching skills, boundaries, and behavior. If we lose their heart in the process, nothing else will matter." So if you maybe are hard on them and the connection is a little strained, any type of life lessons being taught or boundaries set they won't recognize them, because that connection is
Hmm.
a little bit strained and lost.
I won't hear it for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Sometimes I like to do the sandwich, right? Where it's
Mm-hmm.
like you say one thing that is like that is there's
Mm-hmm.
struggle that we're working on, and then we say a good thing, and then we sandwich it with an like or I guess it's opposite.
Positive,
Positive, negative,
negative,
positive.
positive.
And
Mm-hmm.
so like making sure that that sandwich is cohesive and really good
Mm-hmm.
together so that they can hear what you have to say because they
Mm-hmm.
feel the positivity and the love coming from you when they have to say it.
Almost like, "I recognized you made your bed this morning. I really appreciate that. But also, can you make sure next time that you put your clothes in the hamper like you always usually do?"
And then following it up
Yeah.
again
With
with
like,
I love it how you're always so diligent about keeping your room clean and you do a
mm-hmm.
really good job at it. And so this is just one extra step that might could help you with that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like something so you're doing the positive and then the constructive feedback and then the positive
Mm-hmm.
again.
Reinforces that.
That's really funny.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this is my favorite part. I love this part. I teach this in my office all the time. As Sydney
Uh-huh.
put this together for us because I usually just scribble this all over the board. In fact, I think it's deeply imprinted into my board because I do this so much. Okay, this is great. I teach my interns this because this is a way to do therapy. It's also a really great way to talk with your spouses. I call this, the words kind of change every once in a while, but this is the model of communicating. And so I really think that this is the dive and the deep set of like how to do it. And I do not believe that I've seen this anywhere. It's just through my own experiences that I came up with this model and I use it all the time. And so let's go through it. Are you ready? Okay. With your kids, we need to listen. And we're listening to hear, but not to be heard. Because sometimes we'll say things where we want to be heard. And so we're listening so we know how we can like butt into that conversation or say like, yeah, but this or yeah, but that. And we can fall into some traps here. And so some of the traps that we can fall into is like we want to rebuttal. Like, or we want to conform, get them to conform, or we want I statements, right? Like, but I feel, and that this is not the time for that. We really just need to listen to hear them and not, so we don't have to feel like we need to be heard at this moment. This is also a great way for them to feel like with a peace, like a heart of peace. And I don't know if any of you have read, you know, there's a couple of books out there that talk about the heart of peace, but coming in with a heart of peace, not a heart of war. And we're showing that through like intensive or intuitive listening. And so thinking about listening for the why, listening for why they did the thing that they did in that. Um, you know, it's to teach you how to have some empathetic perspective through the listening and hearing that. Um, are they malicious or deep down are they really wanting to hurt you in what they did? And so listening to them can formulate us of gaining a deeper understanding. So now, um We also need to show verbals when we're listening, not verbals, non-verbals, which is
Nonverbal.
how we're folding our arms, how we're rolling our eyes. Are we listening? Are we distracted on our phones or looking at things around us? Like making sure that we're really making eye contact and making them feel heard. The other thing is the verbals. So, yeah, the nodding of the head, the leaning forward in the chair, so that they can feel like they're really important to you when they're telling you these things, which is so important. Now here we go back. We're going into mirroring. Now mirroring and validation can sometimes be connected together. And so let me show you how this kind of happens. So when we mirror back, we're telling them exactly what we heard them say. So it sounds like what you're saying is. Um, and that can be really important because what this does is it gives them the ability, and I'm thinking of teenagers here or even your spouse, but you can also do this with little kids. It seems like what you're saying here is that you really wanted that toy on that shelf, right? And then we can go into validation, which is I can see why you would want that toy. That looks like a really fun toy. And so with a teenager, it can be like, it sounds like you fell for a trap of staying up all night long and you're now struggling to get up for school in the morning. That would be really hard. I can see why you're struggling to get up for school in the morning. I can see why you stayed up late last night and why you would want to, right? So we're mirroring and validating. The mirroring part is to help them see that we are understanding what they're saying, and then they can redirect us or they can tell us differently if not. So if our mirroring back is incorrect, they can be like, no, you're not hearing me. Oh good, I'm so glad that we have this and I'm telling you this so that I can recorrect that and make sure that I get the right one. And then validation is really important because validation is us sitting on their side of the couch, knowing them the way that I know you, or knowing you the way that I know you. I can see why this would be a big deal for you. I can see why that would be. I'm not telling them that they're right. I'm not even telling them that they're wrong. I am just telling them, I'm giving them positive statements that help them see that, like, I can see why they would do that behavior. And what that does is it just validates them. It makes them feel like it's a safe place to talk to you. Now, sometimes we've got some big behaviors in here that are not really helpful or can produce some complications or some problems for their life, right? And so sometimes I'll get parents in here, they'll be like, but they're doing promiscuous behavior that's going to cause complications for the rest of her life. She could get pregnant, or he could get STDs, or, there's going to be an alcohol problem or a drug problem. Okay, but then there's something deeper here that's causing them to fall to those things. So let's dive in and try to seek to understand what's really happening, because they might not feel safe with talking to you about this, which is why it's leading them to go into those places of those behaviors, because they're not feeling the safety. So what this does is the listening, mirroring, and validation is really pulling down the wall. And when we pull down the wall, it allows us to get to a place where we can get into the redirection. Now, sometimes redirection comes tomorrow. It doesn't come today. But the redirection helps them see, like, mom is really on my side or dad's really on my side. He can really see and understand me. And therefore, I'm feeling safe now to open up and to talk, right? And that's where we really want to listen again. Now, in the redirection, once we get the walls down and they're feeling safe and secure, then this is a great place for us to maybe give some components of education. Maybe we can go into a deeper level of validation for them. We can help them. We can also go into a deeper questioning. We can help them conform to the rules and why it's important that we go off of those rules and what those rules can lead to. We can acknowledge their fears. We can also help make statements. I can see why you would want to do that. That must have been really hard for you, deeper level of validation in that. But also the questioning. This is the part that I love the most, is asking questions. I get to the redirect and I want to ask questions of, why did you feel the need to stay up all night last night? I can see why. How did that help you? Like, how did that, what did that do? Did it do what you thought it was going to do for you? Right? So asking questions that can help them. It's like redirecting them around the piece there so that they can say, "Ooh, that actually really wasn't as helpful as I thought it was going to be." Yeah, that's true. I can see why you would think that it would have been by trying that. And I'm glad that you tried that. So now we can redirect and go into a different pathway for your life. And so it's just getting them into a place where they can definitely open up. There's some components in here. There's other things on this redirect, such as strategy, digging deep, finding like a deeper areas of talking with them, and I think that that can be really really helpful. So those are some of the things that I think is super important when we're trying to do like this model of communication, is really opening a pathway and a doorway that's safe for them to be able to open up to you, but then also for them to be able to hear you. Because if you go right in and you're not listening and you're not seeking to be heard and you're really seeking for them to hear you, then they're going to shut down and they're going to try to one up you the whole time. They're going to try to save their ego. They're going to try to like rebuttal all the things or discredit you on the things that you're trying to say, or they might just full out ignore you. And they might just nod their head like, okay, 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 to get you out their room.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. I think it's very important to learn how to properly communicate with our children. Let's move on to some positive parenting. Now, before I talk about positive parenting, I just want to give a quick little brief overview of the 4 different parenting styles, which is authoritative, which is the positive parenting that's flexible but still has high expectations. Authoritarian is the inflexible, disciplinary, overparenting, maybe a little bit of the helicopter mom or dad that you sometimes see. And then permissive is indulgent, kind of um, lets the child walk all over them. And then the uninvolved is the indifferent, neglectful, kind of just like disengaged parent. So we'll talk about those more in depth in a later week, but I just wanted to give a brief overview so we can fully understand positive parenting, which is rewarding coping behavior and then managing your own anxiety, and don't let your child feel your anxiety. They have enough of things on their plate and they don't need to also be worrying about mom and dad's worries and struggles because they have their own. And then develop family communication skills and problem solving skills together as a family unit. It builds that relationship that your family is a safe place. And then the concepts of authoritative and democratic parenting styles is something that we really want to look into. And then lastly, I just want to talk about vulnerability with your child. Um, Here's a little meme I'm sure that we can all relate to. I think being vulnerable is something that is very difficult, and we don't really like to be vulnerable with others and maybe even with ourselves. But Brene Brown says it best: vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. Vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. And vulnerability is not a weakness, it's our greatest measure of courage. I know personally my best relationships or connections with others have come from moments of vulnerability from both sides. And I think letting your child see that you are human as well. I know as myself as a child, we put our parents on a pedestal and we think our parents are perfect and that they know right and wrong and everything, but letting them see that you don't know everything and that you do make mistakes will help them be able to feel more comfortable to share their own mistakes with you and their own concerns because they've received that from you.
I love this. I love vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the parents that are the most vulnerable teach the most imperative concepts to their children. And there's not a bigger gift that you can give than vulnerability to your child, admitting when you're wrong, taking accountability for the things that you mess up on, telling them you're sorry,
Mm-hmm.
is so important. And so, I mean, I don't want it to go all back to like your children's behavior is because of you, but there is a lot of truth to it. Like our children's behavior is because of us in some regard or another, and it definitely could be biological. There could be components of mental illness, or other factors that are getting in the way for sure. But if we can do all that we can do, and have some self compassion for ourselves of just trying the best that we know how. These
Mhm.
kids we were not given um, uh, a form on like perfectionism and how to raise the perfect child. Like,
Mhm.
there's no possible way to do that. And so we have to walk into it and lean into the fact that we are going to make mistakes and that there is going to be some complications that come up. And the more that we can accept our part and not say, well, but, or yeah, but instead say, you're right. Like, there was some components of me not really paying attention to you. And I am sorry that you felt that way. That would not feel good to feel that way. And I don't want to be that type of parent for you. I want to be a better parent for you. And I'm learning and I'm working on it. I think can have such fundamental components of healing for that child and the ability to like move forward and to learn some of those same words to use back to you. I
Mhm.
mean, how would you like it if your child came to you and was like, yeah, I played a part in that. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Like, ooh, I don't want to be that kind of kid for you. I want to be a better kid. Like, wouldn't that be amazing? And of course, they don't have the brain power to do that all yet because they're still building their brain. They won't get it until 25 and 30 for men. But for the most part, if we can have those components of like, self-reflection and understanding and being able to put a situation together where we can actually showcase some of these and model some of these components that they should really add into their life, it could be such a great gift to give our children.
Mhm.
Well, you did such a good job. This was
Oh,
awesome.
thank
Should we show
you.
them the references? Let's get
Oh,
the references,
I
take a
think I have it
picture because
blocked, but
it's blocked. There's a bunch of references. She put them
well,
at the end of every
yes.
page anyway. So
Mhm.
we will have these slides online
Mhm. And the references will be included.
and the references will be included. But we just want to thank you for joining us today. Of course, this is like really important components. Don't feel overwhelmed or flustered in
Mhm.
seeing some of these things. If you're noticing some of these things, now is the ability to take charge and actually redirect your life into changing some of these things out. If you're noticing that there's some complications in the way that you communicate with your children or your child or your teen or your spouse,
Mhm.
then like do some reflection into yourself and make some changes, and maybe you'll see some positivity that kind of redirects their behaviors and does things in a different way, which is really awesome and great. What should we look forward to next time?
Next time we are talking about the second R, reflection. Mm.
Reflecting. I
Mhm.
love that. How can that be a big, huge issue with some of our children today and some of our teenagers and our parenting styles? You're
Yes.
about to find out. So follow us again. We're getting excited. So, group number 3 for parenting class,
Mhm.
reflection. Until then, thanks for joining us, and we'll
Yes.
see you next time.
Thank you.